Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. There's a lot of hype around electric vehicles at the moment, and in other parts of the world at least, the take-up rate is strong. It's improving a bit here, but Australia still has a long way to go before it catches up to places like Europe and the US. Behind the scenes, though, a huge amount of work is being done to establish the infrastructure needed to support the rise of EVs. One of the companies pushing it forward is Everty, a tech company working with companies on EV charging solutions. Carola Jonas is the founder and CEO of Everty. Carola, welcome to Fear and Greed.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
We'll get to what Everty does, but up front, let's start by looking into the future. When do you think electric vehicles will be a normal part of life in Australia rather than a novelty?
That is a very good question because the forecasts by all the experts, they differ quite a lot. But I do believe that we're going to see 80% of any cars sold being EVs by 2030. But it could also happen earlier if price parity between an EV and a petrol car hits Australia in 2026 or 2027, then it would be a normal thing to buy the electric one because it's cheaper to run and nicer to drive. So it depends a little bit on where the market stands in the next, let's say, 5 to 7 years.
Okay, we'll get into that in a moment. What does Everty do?
So we are predominantly a software company, but also a charging infrastructure services company. And so basically what we do is we install and maintain charging infrastructure, but we also have that software layer, which is like an operating system on a computer or your Microsoft Office on a computer. You really do need an application that helps you to enable and operate your infrastructure, especially when it's unattended somewhere along a highway. You need remote visibility.
Okay, so if I think of this in internal combustion terms, someone produces the petrol pump and someone installs the petrol pump and it sits there, but someone's got to operate it. And that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And similar to a lot of the petrol stations now providing apps to use and pay at the petrol pump, you do the same with the Everty app. You go to a charger and you use the app to start, stop it, and process the payment.
Okay, so it relies on other parties like commercial buildings or residential developments or fleets looking to incorporate EV charging into their properties. Where are we up to in that respect?
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of growth over the last couple of years. I think people have understood that in order to bring the EVs, the cars themselves in, we need to get that infrastructure in place first because no one wants to buy an electric car if you can't charge it. And so a lot of property companies, shopping centers, councils have already started installing charging infrastructure. And we're also seeing a lot of corporate fleets actually transitioning their cars to EV and installing charging infrastructure in their own company buildings.
Carola, I'm going to ask a really dumb question, but the benefit of my job is that I can ask anything I want. If I had bought an EV, how do I charge it? Can I charge it at home? Right? That's the first question. What do I need to charge it at home? Otherwise, is it like going to the local kind of department store or the local mall or the local charging station and using an app like yours to charge it?
Yeah, so in theory, you can charge an EV at home from a normal wall socket. You can just plug it into a 10 amps power supply. That is very, very, very slow charging and only really suitable for if you have like the whole night or even longer, or if you have a very small battery. If you have a larger battery, then you're probably more likely to install a dedicated charging station in your garage, if that is possible. If you have on-street parking and can't charge at home, then you would certainly look for faster charging solutions at your, as you said, local shopping center. Or there's also petrol stations now installing charging stations on their forecourts. There'll be a variety of different locations. I think the most important thing is we're using EVs like we use our mobile phones. So we just plug it in when we see the battery is going a little low. We're giving it a top up. And so wherever your car is parked during the day, that's where you ideally want to charge it to.
Stay with me, Carola. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is Carola Jonas, founder and CEO of Everty. Okay, so are we seeing greenfield sites, be they residential or commercial, increasingly introducing charging stations anyway?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot happening in the residential market, and the policy settings are going to change next year. That for anything that's being built new and a new construction needs to be 100% EV ready, or that's at least the target they're going for. And that means that at least all the cabling in the car parks need to be provided so that when the EVs are coming, we can easily pop a charging station in and have it operational.
Okay, you talked about fleets earlier on. Are big business supporting the shift to EVs?
Yes, a lot of big businesses, first of all, have sustainability targets where they want to have 100% renewable energy or net zero emissions by a certain date. And we see a lot of leading companies now transitioning their vehicles over to EVs because if you look at the transport sector in general, that's 20% of Australia's emissions. And it can easily be avoided by the use of EVs if we obviously also clean up our power supply and have more renewable energy.
Okay, so one of your clients is Transport New South Wales, for example, a government client in New South Wales. What do you do for them? And I mean, I'm not asking to tell us things you shouldn't tell us, but I'm trying to get a feel for how Everty works with its clients.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for them, we supplied and installed the charging stations, and they're using it on the Everty platform, which allows them to monitor whether the chargers are working okay. We also do load management. If you have a lot of cars charging at the same time, you might have to be mindful of the electricity supply and how much is used by a building. So it's a full turnkey solution that we've provided to them.
Okay, and when you say you install the charging stations, someone else manufactures the charging stations, though, and you're installing their stations. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. So we're hardware agnostic. We work with all of the big brands that you would normally know in the market, like ABB, Siemens, Schneider, Delta, etc. So we basically procure the charging stations from these international suppliers and then on-sell them to our customers and have an electrician install them and get them set up for the use.
So, how does the economics work? Can you actually help whoever is providing the EV make money from it? Because it's not necessarily just the person living in a building, certainly in the case of in big malls and things like that. Can you help them make money by installing charging stations?
Yes, absolutely. So we have customers that offer their charging stations to the public, and that could either be in public car parks or in council locations, in tourist areas. And basically, what happens there is that an EV driver uses the Everty app to start and stop a charger. And then at the end of the charging session, we know how much electricity was supplied to the car, and then we bill the credit card of that EV driver. So we're basically collecting the payment from the EV drivers and then pay that revenue out to whoever owns and operates the charging station.
It's sort of ingenious. When did you come up with Everty's been going for 5 or 6 years? Is that right? 6 years, I think, 2016.
Yeah, we've been going for 5 years. So incorporated in 2017, where there was very few cars and very few charging stations as well. And that was exactly the problem we wanted to solve. So I was previously working in like solar and batteries and inverters. And it just puzzled me that Australia has the highest rooftop solar uptake per capita, but we didn't have any EVs. And obviously back then, access to charging and infrastructure was one of the biggest problems. And yeah, we said we've got to do something about that.
So, how far away are we from solving it?
Oh, we're still far away. It's a long way to go because this kind of infrastructure is not cheap and we need a lot of it. If we think of having potentially like 15 million EVs in Australia by 2030 or 2040, we would probably want to see at least 3 to 5 million charging stations to support that.
Wow. Is the government doing enough? I mean, they recently made some changes like removing fringe benefits tax on EV purchases, but everything is a help. So no criticism there. But do we need a lot more government money, state and federal, for it to roll out enough of these EV charging stations?
Well, I mean, governments can always do more. But looking at the current government, since we had a change, the current government in the last 5 months has probably done more than the previous government in the last 5 years. So I'm very happy with what they're doing. But there's a few key policies that we really need to set in Australia. And one of them is lowering our emissions standards, or not lowering the standards, but making sure that we get lower emission cars into the country. Because what happens in Europe is that the car manufacturers are being penalized and have to pay if they introduce cars that have a high CO2 emission. And therefore, they need to offset that with low emission cars. We don't have that. So we're basically telling the world, you can bring your dirty cars to Australia and we will not penalize you for that. And you don't have to do anything to make up for dumping your dirty cars on Australian shores. So that's certainly something we need to address ASAP.
And is that what's happening?
Yes, the industry is working with the government on consultations. So the government is planning to roll out a national EV strategy. That consultation has closed, and now they're going through, I think they had 500 submissions. So they have a lot of work to do to go through all that industry feedback, but they're working on it.
Carola, thank you very much for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thank you.
That was Carola Jonas, founder and CEO of Everty. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.